Hey, welcome to Automation Notes. Brought to you by DocDigitizer, the Automation Notes podcast is a collection of new and inspiring insights about intelligent automation. We'll discuss with the world's leading intelligent automation minds the most recent trends, success stories, and promising projects in the intelligent automation space. But before we dive into today's show, if you want to take your automation projects level, leveraging critical data locked in your documents, photos, or emails, visit DocDigitizer.com and find out how you can deploy the world's most reliable intelligent document processing platform in less than 1 day. Thanks to its proprietary technology, using the most advanced AI breakthroughs in cognitive automation, natural language processing, and a built-in expertly designed human-in-the-loop, DocDigitizer offers the world's first all-inclusive intelligent document processing platform. You can get 100% accurate data from nearly any document with close to zero setup and a full pay-per-use model all into a single API call. Whether you're looking to process a simple invoice, streamline your customer onboarding journey, or get data from your legal contracts, DocDigitizer will be your trusted IDP partner. They also offer unusual features like handwrite support, complex table data extraction, fraud detection, and out-of-the-box integration with UiPath, Blue Prism, Automation Anywhere, and many other automation tools. So stop spending months getting datasets and training models to deploy an IDP tool, and then end up with costly human-in-the-loop data validation on every single document. DocDigitizer offers an all-in-one, fully managed API, making intelligent document processing truly easy. But don't just take my word for it. Take the word of leading global 2,000 organizations, all loving and using DocDigitizer to unlock hyper-automation over complex and unstructured mission-critical processes. Head over to DocDigitizer.com and start your all-inclusive IDP journey. But it is now time for another incredible Automation Notes show.
Hello and welcome to our show. My name is João Fernandes, founder and CEO of DocDigitizer, and I will be your host for today's episode of Automation Notes. Today we have an amazing guest, Brendan from rippey. I'm not sure if it's like this, but
rippey.ai.
rippey.ai. So hi, Brendan. Thank you for being on our show.
You're more than welcome, and thank you for having me here. I know we operate in an industry where we could be classified as competitors, but I love the spirit of actually having open conversations about how we can make the industry better.
Yes, and that is exactly the purpose of this podcast, is to allow as many people as possible to learn from people that are doing some amazing stuff on intelligent automation. So independent if you are a client, a vendor, or even a competitor of DocDigitizer, most definitely we want you on our show so we can share insights, and hopefully if the market is more mature, we will all win. So yeah, I'm very excited for this conversation. For the people that don't know you and don't know your company, do you want to share some insights about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely, yeah. So rippey.ai is the company name. And at the core of rippey.ai is our wee little robot called Rippey, who, despite his little size, is very powerful and is able to transform a lot of the business of maritime logistics in a way that's very cost-saving and transformational. Our main focus with Rippey is to take the cost out of operations. That's really our focus, and to do it in an industrial standard in a meaningful way. And one of the things we like to do is to bring predictability into the maritime logistics industry, where they have a lot of incoming documents, as you know, in your DocDigitizer, experience. There's a lot of documents out there, and they're not understood digitally. They're stored digitally as in PDFs and scans and so forth, but they're not often understood from a semantical point of view. So at the point of entry into our system, that's what Rippey does. He takes those documents and he, absolutely gives them semantical meaning. And he will work with international standards, whether it's IATA, airway bills, or DCSA, e-bill of ladings, and so forth. And that means we can onboard them into the customer's enterprise system. And that means that we now have a proper semantical understanding of that document, and that document can be circled using the international standards interoperability between different players. So it saves a lot of handling cost, and it also gives you real-time access to information.
Fantastic. And it's a pretty, I must say that I was surprised, because you guys are so target on this kind of segment that is maritime logistics, and we will drill down on that. But how do you guys started? You were called RPA Labs up until October, right? So tell me a little bit about your path.
So I crossed paths in a former life. We were part of one of the largest technology companies, predominantly in aviation. But we also had a division led by Matt, which was Matt, the CEO of Rippey, the now founder and CEO of Rippey. So Matt was the leader of the Maritime Logistics component of the company. So I knew Matt through that. I was the global CTO. And Maritime probably wasn't a huge part of our business, but it was 100% of Matt's business. And Matt had been acquired by our parent company. So I got to know Matt through that. Now, Matt set up Rippey with a view, and there's another guy there, Glenn, who was also one of the best salesmen in the business, if you happen to cross paths. So Glenn and Matt have just this vast, deep knowledge of the industry. I'd like to say I'm like that, but I'm not. I do know cargo intimately well. Certainly aviation I know inside out. But in terms of maritime, I know my way around. But these guys are gurus of the industry, so to speak. And so where my interest comes in is around the technology. It's very exciting because it's an industry in its prime from a digital point of view. I mean, there's big ships there. It's incredible, the engineering feats, the amount of cargo that's shipped around the world. We saw it during COVID. It was just mind-boggling volumes. But the digitization of the industry is only barely starting. And it reminds me of 20 years ago when we started building booking engines for aviation. The Travelocities, the ePhotos, the canoes, they were only just emerging. And the industry didn't know how to collaborate. That was the biggest challenge. So I see a lot of similarities there in the maritime industry. So the motivation here was to accelerate that digital voyage, that digital journey, and no better men than Matt and Glenn to understand what that looks like.
And it's really interesting to understand that this kind of this maritime logistics field is like probably nobody's looking at it properly. It's like everybody is talking with banks, is talking with insurance companies. So why focus on this? You already shared that your founders were very experts on this field, but why this field, and why do you think AI products and automation products have a strong fit on this field?
Yeah, so the skill sets at the core of the founding team are definitely aligned with this industry. Having said that, now we're quite multimodal. We're dealing with road, rail, air, but at the core of what we do is maritime. That's where we're amazing, and that's what gets us well endeared and ingratiated with the customers, because that's our core skill set. And we understand their challenges, but so we're not just walking in as bunch of garage techies to say, hey, we've got this really good technology. We're also walking in and saying, we understand, over 20, 30-year careers, we understand the challenges, how difficult it is to change something midstream, the challenges around large BPO teams, all of those kind of call centers. We understand them. So we can walk in with a language that makes sense to the CFO and the COO. So we're not conflicting with either, and it's something in harmony with their own strategic plans. So they trust us. And on the back of that, then we do POCs and so forth, just to show them how transformational this can be. One of the really strange things is that, I still get mind boggled about how much of the industry is still run manually. I just get shocked from time to time and thinking this is a no-brainer. So there's a lot of change to happen. It's wide open. Now, we don't just focus on the documents. We also focus on tracking. We focus on quotes and we focus on booking and ERD, LRD, container type, sophistication. And again, our little friend Rippey, he travels around. He does all the emails for you. He does the chatbots. He does it multilingual. He can track your container. He can get you a lovely quote and take that quote to a booking if that's what you want to do. So it's kind of right across the whole spectrum of the back office.
Almost end to end, right?
Almost
end to end in terms of the process.
Yes, actually, that would be a good accuracy. Now, we don't do optimization of engines or scheduling of maintenance for the ships and all that. And there's huge scope there. There's companies out there like CanScan, Scoot Science, Metis, and what's the other? Captain AI, autonomous ships. So they're all really good at AI, but in completely different sectors. So that it's ripe for transformation across the whole industry.
Fantastic. And can you share some of the products that you have built for this industry?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, the primary contact point typically with a customer can be at their point of contact for their customer, or where they ingest large volumes of documents. And these are things we do really well. And we love getting, large volumes of, different types of documents and, different challenges around that. And if I sat here and said it's a press of a button, I'd be dishonest. It's not. There's a templatization mentality because there's different shapes and sizes. So you have to be a little bit smart on your technology, but it's never 100% out of the box. Press a big button and everything flows through. There are challenges around OCR, character recognition, and so forth, and fonts and quality and all of that. But in the main, the main core of the products, they do pump through the system pretty smoothly. And then you have edge cases, which, you remediate in different ways. So what it does do is you basically walk into a customer and you say, look, what you're doing today in a manual process, we can remove about, off the top of our head without even seeing it. We know that 60 to 80% of that work can be taken away in the morning. And that's a hell of a proposition. As you said, the banks, the medical industry is looking at precision medicine, and banking is looking at neo-banking and digital wallets. It's a very competitive space, but nobody's giving them those sort of numbers where they can save, up to 80% on cost without even examining the problem space. And that's why maritime is so lucrative in the sense that it's very, very rewarding both for the vendor and for the customer. So it's one of these true win-wins left in the digital space.
And you mentioned some of the positives impacts that you have, but I will assume that probably the level of maturity that you have on these companies in terms of intelligent automation and in particular intelligent document processing, I would say it's very low. So what are the challenges when talking with them and making them understand beyond the business case? Of course, 80% is no brainer, but then what kind of pitfalls, what kind of challenges do you have on such an immature space? So
that's a really, really good point, because what you don't want to do is come in and be the educator of the executive. You don't want to come in and say, we need to overcome your intransigence. That's not our job. If there's an intransigence to change, we shouldn't really be in that room, because, we are evangelistic, evangelistic in a sense. So you do have to move certain parts of the company. But if we're in on the invitation of a CEO or a CFO, we're in a good place. But if somebody's bringing us to meet, an intransigent CEO says, hey, everything's fine, then, if you're sitting in the middle of a burning house and you're saying all is fine, do you need the fire brigade at all?
Exactly. Just leave the room and let it burn.
Yeah, because the outcomes will be pretty obvious, because it's such a competitive market at times. So if you look at the container prices, what were they, 20,000? They're down to less than 5 now, and maybe even dropping lower. So the industry can flip very quickly and cost can become a big concern, and then it can disappear again where they're just throwing money. It's coming easy. So the more enduring companies are the ones who have the foresight and have the teams in place. And what I have noticed is there are digital strategy teams appearing in the top players out there, like Maersk and CMA and folks like that. They're really looking forward to sort of saying, hey, how do we run this as a proper, agile, finger on the pulse business where we know our costs and we're not just waiting at the end of the month. I can also compare with aviation where, 20 years ago with the global settlement system, an airline didn't know if they were bust or profitable till the end of the month when all the coupons were counted. They literally didn't know. And that was a shock for me, as a young man coming, and I was working on some bank projects and the likes, but coming into aviation, I got absolutely shocked. I said, you don't know your numbers. And to a certain extent, maritime is still a little bit in that space where they're a little bit dark at times, or at least there's a delay in data. So a lot of our propositions are based on real world experience from our team saying, hey, here's a way I can automate your bookings, for example, because if you take the booking process, you've got a contract at the beginning of the year, you've got these slots and you've got certain assurances, but maybe you need some spot rates here and there and you need some urgent items to be shipped, but that's not an online process. It's not offline entirely, but there's a delay in there where a human intervenes and looks up prices. So there isn't this dynamic pricing where you can go in and say, hey, just give me a price. I'm a buyer willing to buy right now if you can show me. But in a lot of cases, they don't know their inventory and they don't know till close to the shipping time because of the contract and the whole bookings, if you like. They don't know the availability till the last moment sometimes. So there's all that kind of offline operations that need to come online for everything to be, smooth and end-to-end digital. So you can't wave a magic wand. But for the more advanced operators, they're pretty good. They're already looking at this, and it's part and parcel of the business. So it's going to evolve into a case of having to interoperate in a much more seamless way. People can't afford now to have huge teams doing all their emails, huge teams, answering online, chatbots. They need robots to do all the manual intervention that they do today, and then save the human as the experienced operator for the edge cases and the special requests.
And do you think it's just a matter of saving some headcount? Because you mentioned there that by streamlining these processes, you end up being faster with less lead times, and probably that could save you also money or increase your margin. So what is your opinion? Do you think the driver is headcount optimization, or there are other types of drivers for the adoption of these kind of technologies?
Yeah, strangely enough, our experience has actually been the flip of that, where a team is just deployed to do a lot more things or to take a lot more capacity. So what we're not trying to do with customers for the most part is to say, hey, I've got 100 folks. How do I get rid of them and bring in a robot that does everything they used to do? That's not the proposition we're making, and it's certainly not feasible because, you need the human intervention. But what you can do is scale that team. So instead of receiving, say 100,000 documents a week, that team can now receive 1 million a week because all the donkey lifting and the field, identification and the semantics is done by our little friend Rippey. And all they have to do then is either verify that or then engage in a process of exceptions handling or going back to the client and saying, I got 2 of the 3 documents, the third one hasn't arrived yet. Can you please send it on? And even Rippey can do that part of it, but it could be the managing of the exceptions beyond that, where there's a time frame or, you need to ring up the customer and talk to them and ask for the document. So it brings back the human contact, and it really scales teams. And the teams that can scale are the ones who are going to be the most competitive. So where you have non-digital operators basically struggling with costs, you'll have the highly digital operators able to operate at a lower unit cost and then put them out of business. That's the rule of the jungle, really.
Exactly. And where do you see these organizations failing? Because since they are starting now, or they started a couple of months, years ago on this, on developing intelligent automation initiatives, where do you see them failing? Are there any common pitfalls that they always do?
Yeah, so a lot of my life I've spent in consultancy roles with sort of niche areas: banking, healthcare, aviation, maritime logistics, cargo generally. So what I often find is that people underestimate the experience, the human experience. And when you underestimate the human experience and human spirit, you underestimate the almost, balance sheets traditionally have a thing in there called goodwill. It's a way of trying to capture the human psyche, right, and the human condition. So, and it's very difficult to monetize that, but it's also very easy to see what happens when you lose that human contact. Exactly. And you lose that human experience. So this is not robots versus humans. This is letting robots do what robots do and making sure humans don't do what robots can do, because that's not the most exciting job to wake up to every morning. But what you can do is leverage the experience of folks who have been in the industry for many, many years. So it's very difficult. Like even with chatbots and emails, we do an excellent job of dealing with, huge volumes of emails and people asking, where's my cargo? And us going back and saying, here's your details. You can click here. Or a quotation, and we say, okay, we received a request for quotation to go to Shanghai, but hey, where do you want to send it from? But by the way, here's a quotation from your, details in your email. We figured out who you are, where your HQ is. So if it's from your HQ, here's a quote, but tell us where you want to send it from. Is it door to door or port to port? It's a lot of intelligent stuff. But where the human comes in is the experience, multi-lane options and, how to deal with certain types of cargo, dangerous goods, which ports can handle certain things. You can build an encyclopedia on that, but I'm always blown away by the power of the human experience in actually handling that in a complex situation. And most inquiries are not at that level. So if we can focus the humans on the complex queries and the robots on the repetitive ones, then you have a really good combination. And that allows folks in the industry then to, rise up higher and have more value add for the actual, and rather than spending 90% of their time doing mundane tasks and 10% on some tricky, complex problem solving, that person can then be moved into an exceptions team who now have the time to ring the customer, because the costs have not risen, they've actually gone down, but the skilled operators can actually make phone calls and human contact. And that's hugely important. We should never underestimate that. So that's the biggest pitfall I see, is where sometimes the bean counters don't value that.
And I would say that piece of advice will apply to, I think, almost all the intelligent automation projects, independent on industry, I would say, because too often there's this myth about replacing humans with robots or automating stuff that we neglect their complexity of the complexity of the process, because the human is very good at doing it, but then we understand that there are a lot of layers of complexity, so we cannot just throw automation on top and hope it works. So I think it's a great piece of advice and a very common pitfall. Right. You probably, although you target this niche market, you probably have contact with a lot of different tools in the market, some competitors, some other tools that you probably use to complement your own toolkit. How do you see the intelligent document processing market or the intelligent automation market? Do you see new startups appearing? Do you think startups can challenge the incumbents, the biggest companies, the ones that do everything, is one size fits all? How do you see this market?
I think there's two sweet spots. One is where a bunch of folks really focus on some core technology, like and build original intellectual property. So if somebody comes maybe 5-10 years ago, it was all who could do the best OCR. And I think that's been broadly commoditized and open sourced and easy to pick up now. The next phase is the semantics, like the semantic reading of a document and being able to handle, edgeways, sideways documents or, exceptions cases. So being able to do that out of the box and being able to learn dynamically. So if people can develop, and we develop some stuff in-house ourselves. And that's the kind of exciting stuff at the end, the exciting edge of the industry where we're always improving the quality of what we do. At the same time, we do depend on, original licensed IP, like intellectual property, because nobody can build everything themselves. That's the first sweet spot. The other sweet spot is just stepping to the further extreme and saying, I'm going to solve a business problem and I'm going to leverage the technology. Because in a sense, and I've said this in rooms where I've given lectures, in a sense, technology is irrelevant. And people get shocked. They go, but I said, if you're talking about technology, you're usually talking about a problem or a challenge, because when it works, you don't need to talk about it. It's like if you drive to work in your car, you don't stop halfway, open the bonnet or the hood and look at the engine and go, wow, this is amazing. You use it. You get to, the car safely brings your kids to school. It safely brings you on time to work. It brings you home. It does a job. It's a business outcome. So with technology on the other extreme, it's a business outcome. Are you achieving the business outcome? So the sweet spot on that side is walking into a room and understanding the business of the folks sitting across the table who have the challenge. Because if you understand them rapidly, you can then propose solutions that actually make sense rather than walking in with a problem seeking, a solution seeking the problem. So the sweet spot for me is creating some amazing IP and fitting into the niche, the rainbow of different systems interoperably, and or being able to walk into a gigantic corporation and solve a big problem for them. So, and we play more into the latter, where we do our own technology development. We do use licensed software as well. We do combine things and we do use innovative solutions, but we don't go in banging the table saying how great we are technologically. We come with a business solution for the guy on the far side, because technology is irrelevant. If it works, it's irrelevant.
Exactly. And at some point nowadays, I would say everything is possible with technology. So why talking about technology? Let's talk about solving problems and understanding problems, and then just picking the toolkit or the set of tools or the set of technology that might do the job. You mentioned for a couple of times semantic. And that is something that we are also very interested in at DocDigitizer. We are doing a lot of things there. But can you share for the technical folks that are hearing a little bit more about this concept? Is that different from having pair values as an output of an OCR?
So at the end of the day, yes, this OCR is really just it's reading fonts. And it's saying, based on this font, here's the content of that field. And it's also, if it's sophisticated enough, it's just not telling you what it's reading, it's telling you where it finds it as well. And that's all important information, but it doesn't tell you the semantic of the document. What is the document? Are you reading a passport? Is it a bill of lading? Is it accounts payable? Like what is the document? And when you know what the document is at the macro level, so semantically you know what the document is, you then need to know where all the fields. You might have multiple dates on a sheet. What are the dates? Maybe a date is the date of publication or the date of print or the date of contract, and the other date might be an ETA date of delivery. So you've got to figure out, whilst two fields are exactly the same in format, they have very different meanings, and semantics is all about meanings. So the skill for me in the industry is figuring out those fields and making sure you capture those fields and you understand what those fields are. Because if you want to build a JSON file against the DCSA standard for the industry, you need to know where to put that data into the JSON file, so the next interoperable system will be able to find the right field in the right location. So semantics are terribly, terribly important.
And that is exactly where the human is very good at is mapping stuff that is written on a paper to a taxonomy, to a semantic. but teaching machines how to do it is very hard. So I'm very glad you guys are following that approach. We are also following that approach. I think it's way above just reading characters and making pair values based on positions. So where do you...
Can I just add to that? Sorry to interrupt you, but just on the point you made earlier in terms of why focus on maritime, because if you want to be out there just taking any document from any industry, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a good business model because of the vast expanse of need. But we want to be really good at one area, and we want to be like the best in the world at maritime logistics. So they walk in the door and say, can you guys, we say, that's what we do day in, day out. And as we gather the experience, because as the customers get bigger and bigger and the volumes get bigger for us, we're parsing millions of documents then and saying, hey, we've got some value add here that we can, return back to the industry because we know what's happening. Maybe we can collaborate with folks who are also in maritime logistics, whether, yourselves or whoever else is playing in that space. Maybe we can all get together and say, hey, we've got a collaboration here that could benefit the industry. And we could work with open standards and all of that, and it would push the industry to the next level and make it a better place for operations. We can all benefit from that. That's a win-win,
Exactly, and at some point, due to that to that experience, your own semantic taxonomy will be very close to what they already have in house. So the matching will be much easy and much more out of the box, which also I would say will speed up the project. So yeah, I think it's a very clever strategy. Where do you see this market, this intelligent automation market?
So I think at the moment,
in the next 5 years, I'm not sure if you can even predict, but
yeah, no, I have a podcast next week just on the future of AI in general, because I take a very avid interest in where it's going in terms of actual robots and what they're capable of. And there's some interesting and frightening stories there as well. But for the maritime logistics, I think what we're looking at the moment is this is an immature market, but rapidly maturing because it's a no-brainer. There's an economic tilt towards using digitization as a means of effective competitiveness. So it's a no-brainer now for CEOs. And what I see, if you take the 5-year window, it would be, I would call that the maturing stage, and maybe better referred to as the interoperability stage, because I think at that stage, digitization has to, at that stage, be interoperable, because otherwise there's no real value of just pumping everything into these systems. What we want is, standardization on JSON that we can send between different folks. The electronic bill of lading should automatically be generated. We shouldn't really have in 5 years' time just PDFs, which are scanned documents. I mean, that's really so far behind. It's shocking. But if you have an ecosystem where a bill of lading gets printed or PDF'd anywhere along that system, that's a break point where we can't recover from that. We go back a step and we go back to PDF and we got to upload it again later in that system, which makes no sense. But that happens. There could be a primary system producing an electronic bill of lading, but there's no consumer for it somewhere down the chain. And we pay a heavy price for that because the chain breaks. Now, mentioning chain and 5 years, I do predict there will be a blockchain-based distributed ledger, a public ledger for the industry, where either driven by the standards, the highest standards bodies, or driven by private industry collaborating by saying, look, we need to track things better. Let's have a public blockchain, which is digitally encrypted, and using your digital key, you can see where your cargo is, and the shipper can also see. So you'll have a private key and a public key, and the public key is available to those folks who have the right to see that in that moment in time. And so there's a certain amount of visibility. So my visibility would be based on my rights to see certain cargo, and maybe for a certain time window, and also a certain subset of the data. And the IoT industry is going to emerge strong in this space. It already is. Containers are getting smarter. And cargo is getting smarter because there's a lot of folks making their cargo smarter so that if the container's not smart, at least the cargo's smart. It can say, hey, I got a violation of my temperature restrictions. You know, this is a cool chain and I violated the cool chain or cold chain you know, my orientation was upside down for 6 hours, you know, in a port somewhere. And I can tell you exactly where, and I can tell you the impact, how many newtons of an impact when I was dropped. So you know that a container was dropped upside down and then was rectified. So you have all of that being stored in IoTs, and these devices are getting cheaper and cheaper and no-brainers. So I think that containers will get smart, and the containers will be just constantly transmitting data to an IoT fog. The fog will be curating that data, because sometimes with sensors, you know, it says 18 degrees, 18 degrees, 180 degrees, 80 degrees. You know, the 180 is a spurious piece of data. So you need curation of that. You don't want that one to set off a trigger if it was for 1 millisecond. That makes no sense, right? So that was a corruption of data. So typically it doesn't happen on good quality, but it does happen on sensors because they're digital devices that can, you know, misbehave. So typically I'd see that as a global ledger, which is not owned by anybody, but it's owned by everybody. Nobody has the dominance on it, so it's trusted. Nobody can hack it because it's massively distributed and decentralized, and everyone's a participant, and it becomes the backbone of the industry, and it solves so many problems because you have all your data, so every bill of lading goes on that at birth, and it travels its journey on that blockchain. And number two, you can set up smart contracts, which are essentially running unbrokered by a middleman. So A, you're saving costs. B, you've got a common pane of truth. And it's executed against a delivery sensor that says, hey, your container is now in such and such a port, and using digital wallets, the payment is automatic. Right? So that all takes away a lot of argument over, you know, whose truth is the real truth. It gives you a single form of truth, and a single form of truth is a huge leverage in any industry.
Very promising future ahead. Not sure if all what you describe will happen during the next 5 years.
Yeah, but this is for 5 years. You're right about that, but it's possible.
Let's hope so. Things are much faster than we anticipate. You mentioned that you are participating in a podcast next week. Not sure if that would be your recommendation, but I always like to ask our guests to throw any suggestion on a book to read, podcast, or person to follow. So do you have your suggestion?
Well, it's a no-brainer for me, Joe. It's basically Automation Notes. It's the best podcast in the automation field, and I'm giving you 100% endorsement.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm blushed, but thank you very much.
No, I do really appreciate. I mean, you're obviously a busy guy. You're the CEO, founder of the company. You know, to take the time out to do this is great because, you know, there's an uplift for you, let's be honest. But it's more beneficial for folks out there trying to learn what is the background, you know, in an entertaining way, you know, insights of where's it all going, the 5-year forecast. Everyone's going to have a different opinion. But to take away little nuggets, I think it's a really good thing that you're doing, and you know, long may it last.
It started as a pet project. I think it still is a pet project, but I really believe that sharing knowledge is very important, and there is a huge gap in the market. We see a lot of content being produced by large vendors. Nothing against it, but most of it is very marketing driven. And for people like me that are engineers and they want some more dense information, more meaningful, more insightful information, I think having this kind of one-to-one talks with people that are doing amazing projects, it is much more value than like marketing ebooks that we download from a vendor website. So what is next for you? And how can our audience reach out to you?
So well, the obvious channel to me is, to look at Rippey. That we have a website, obviously, and you can see what we do. And I'm just Brendan at rippey.ai, and that's Romeo India Papa Papa Echo Yankee Alpha India for those who like the military codes. So so anyone wants to reach out, my first name is Brendan. I think it'll appear on the podcast window. So Brendan at rippey.ai. Happy to answer any queries that people have. I love questions and inquisitive minds. In terms of where we're going, we're obviously going to take all of our products to the next level, and we're just going to keep, hitting the wall of the border of the limits of the industry's digital voyage and journey. As I say, we're just going to demonstrate by our outcomes. I think outcomes are the best way to show people, what can happen, rather than talk about it. Our marketing brochures, at the end of the day, just do it. And when you do it, people can see it. And when they can see it, they believe it. And that's the greatest, evangelization of the industry, I think, that you can have.
I am 100% agreeing with you. Brandon, hosting this episode was really a pleasure to me. So thank you again for taking the time to meeting me and being on our show.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to meeting you in face at one of the conferences, or some excuse for you to come to Dubai or me to Portugal. We'll meet up in the next 6 months. We'll make a deal.
We have a large shipping port, so I think one of the largest ones in Europe. So you can come to Lisbon, but also enjoy the boats.
Absolutely.
I have been your host, João Fernandes, and this has been Automation Notes. See you next time.
Wow, what a fantastic show. So many incredible takeaways. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to stay updated with the most recent intelligent automation trends, success stories, and promising projects, please subscribe to Automation Notes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, and YouTube. You can find the links in the subscription. We release a new episode every 2 weeks. But before we leave you today, if you want to take your automation projects to an all-new level, leveraging critical data locked in your documents, photos, or emails, visit DocDigitizer.com and find out how you can deploy the world's most reliable intelligent document processing platform in less than 1 day. You can get 100% accurate data from nearly any document with close to zero setup and a full pay-per-use model all into a single API call. Whether you're looking to process a simple invoice, streamline your customer onboarding journey, or get data from your legal contracts, DocDigitizer will be your trusted IDP partner. DocDigitizer offers an all-in-one, fully managed API, making intelligent document processing truly easy. But don't just take my word for it. Take the word of leading global 2,000 organizations, all loving and using DocDigitizer to unlock hyper-automation over complex and unstructured mission-critical processes. DocDigitizer is helping companies across multiple industries to reach their full potential through data by empowering their digital transformation, driving operational efficiency and human productivity, unlocking the power of their data.